everybody. It's not often that I can say with some confidence, I'll show you a car you've probably never seen before. But today, I think I can do just that. This is a BAE Vantare. The first thing I want to tell you is two things that it definitely isn't. It is not a kit car, and it is also not the new David Brown Speedback GT, even though I forgive you at a quick glance for thinking that it might be. There are some real key differences between that car and this, even though they still take inspiration from the same thing, an Aston Martin DB5. More than that though, this is one of those very unusual examples of a celebrity delving into the world of cars as a result of pure and simple passion. The world of celebrity and the motor car has been intertwined for as long as there have been both celebrities and motor cars, and there are many out there who everybody knows that own a lot of very nice cars. But there aren't as many out there that I think we'd all classify as a true petrolhead. Sure, there are some very well-known examples, AC/DC's Brian Johnson, Pink Floyd's Nick Mason, to name but two. However, this has come from somebody I don't think many people would instantly associate with fast cars. Bradley Walsh. Yeah, that Bradley Walsh. Apparently, somewhere in between appearing on Doctor Who, in the new Darling Buds of May, the revived Blankety Blank, as well as myriad other shows like The Chase, he has come out with a new car. And this is no mere celebrity endorsement of somebody else's baby either, because this is his passion project. And it started, in many ways, a very, very long time ago. Because, as a younger man, Mr. Walsh was apprenticed into Rolls-Royce's helicopter division, where he worked for some time as a metal worker. So he's always had a passion and a fascination with old-school craftsmanship techniques. Alongside that, he's always had an enthusiasm for interesting cars, and to him, there are few more exciting or desirable than an Aston Martin DB5. Not too long ago, he found himself in the enviable position of being able to actually afford his and many others' dream car. He got so far as to actually sourcing one, but then when he drove it, he realised he didn't really like it at all. And that's something I've heard from a lot of people who found themselves behind the wheel of a DB5. Having driven a DB6, I understand entirely why somebody who's lusted after one of these things for decades may not be so sold on the reality of them. So what do you then do? Bradley still had this itch that required scratching, but it didn't seem like anything other than a DB5 was actually going to do it. He thought about a 4, but that wasn't the car he wanted. He thought about a 6, but that wasn't the car he wanted. He then remembered that Aston Martin made a DB7, but like many, he doesn't really consider that to be a particularly authentic Aston Martin. Between the old Jaguar XJS chassis and the Jaguar 6-cylinder engine, there wasn't really an awful lot of room left in that car for genuine Aston Martin. Once you then get to the DB9, it is a fabulous motor car, but not really a car you'd consider currently a genuine classic. In truth, you could actually see this car very much like a DB7 from an alternate timeline. In fact, if you imagine someone doing a morph between a DB5 and a DB9, and halfway through you said stop, this, I think, is what you'd probably wind up with. I'm sure most of you watching will have already decided whether you actually like the car or not, so I'd invite you all to pop into the comment section and give me your thoughts. I can tell you that in person, it actually does look and feel like a relatively high quality product, and it certainly attracts attention. It's one of the great fallacies of fancy car ownership that men buy these things to attract women. I know of very few examples where that has actually happened. More often than not, if you drive a nice car, you're likely to strike up a conversation with another bloke. However, this gets looks from all and sundry, old, young, male, female, and everybody else. Heads turn to this car like nearly nothing else I have ever driven. And I'm sure in the eyes of many, that alone would be enough to justify this car's asking price. What is said asking price? Well, as you happen to ask, expect to part with at least £275,000. And if you happen to think that TV's Bradley Walsh has a couple of bills to settle and this is his get-rich-quick scheme, no, nothing could be further from the truth. I know a number of people that have undertaken projects like this, and I can assure you that by the end of this car's production run, which will be no more than 10 cars, and they are realistic that even that may not happen, I don't think any of the people involved will have really made that much money out of it. The other two people that make up BAE are specialist car guru Mark Harrison, with whom I've worked a number of times, and he's supplied a few cars to the channel, and Brian Hale, who is the coach builder of this operation. And this is really a car constructed in the old coach building tradition, because to make this car, what they did was take an Aston Martin DB5 and remove the entire body, leaving only the very nice VH platform bonded aluminium chassis below, onto which they have placed this all-new carbon fibre construction. You strip away these panels and you will not find a DB5 body lurking below. You won't find anything, just the chassis and engine, which here remains unchanged from its original configuration. In other words, a very pleasing 5.9 litre V12 putting out 450 horsepower, as the donor car here is an earlier DB5. Performance junkies will be happy to know that if you want more power, you can certainly have it. You could start with a later DB5 that already has a little bit more go, and there's a whole world of Aston Martin tuning options available to you. This, though, is about as basic as they come, because really, this is one of these cars that is just not about numbers. It's about a feeling, it's about an experience, it's about evoking memories, about getting reactions from people, and that it certainly does. This also makes my life an awful lot easier. Ordinarily, I would refuse to review any 450 horsepower one-off car in December, but because I know underneath this is a DB5, from the driving that I've done quite a bit today, I can tell you it drives largely like a DB5. If you want, you could even have one of these with a manual gearbox, but this has the more common ZF 6-speed. And I have to say, as much as it pains me to, this gearbox actually pairs with this engine and car very well indeed. That V12 isn't actually as bombastic as you might expect at low RPM, given its displacement. However, show it a country road and it'll still have no problem whatsoever getting you up to the speed limit quite quickly. With a car like this, stuff like numbers doesn't really matter to me that much, because if you said to me how quick is it, I would say simply, it's quick enough. If you were the sort of person that was considering a DB5, this already exists in a world that is totally alien to the performance on offer from that. What does matter to me though is things like noise, and that's where I think David Brown made a little bit of a mistake with the Speedback GT. Because those are based on the old Jaguar XKR, they sound like the old Jaguar XKR. And that's not exactly a bad noise, but a big rumbly V8 is not the right sort of sound for a car like this. Instead, you want that more cultured noise. And the tone you get from this Aston is absolutely pitch perfect. I will confess to exercising extreme caution today because, as I'm sure you can see, the roads are very treacherous. This car is not wearing winter tyres, in fact it's wearing some Continentals on its rather large bespoke 20-inch alloys. They're one of my few genuine criticisms of the car. I think they look just a little bit too big. I'd rather see 18s on here. For a proper period look, I think you do need a little bit more sidewall, although the styling I actually have no issues with. Visibility is also a mixed bag. As with any DB9, you sit rather low, the windows are quite high, and that's been exaggerated by the fact they're raised in this. And that gives the car's side profile a real hot rod look, I think, with these tiny little apertures. But because these windows are so long and the B-pillar almost non-existent, for pulling out of junctions and things like that, this car's actually an absolute dream. Trying to manoeuvre with it is not so easy, and placing it on the road can be tricky. That's thanks in large part to these new wing mirrors, which look period correct, but practically speaking, are awful. It won't surprise you to hear that the steering and handling are all very much like a DB9, which is to say, quite good actually. In all honesty, even if we did have the perfect weather today, hustling this car and giving it hell for leather would just feel a little bit wrong. This is the kind of car that really does relax you. It makes you want to press the auto button, turn sport mode off, and just enjoy that glorious symphony, the view out the front, which is much more interesting than in a regular DB9, and get a chance to count just how many necks have been snapped today on account of your very presence. Because underneath this is still a DB9, it shares many of that car's flaws, including at low speeds a ride that's just a little bit too firm for a GT. But once you get up to national speed limit, the car's ride sorts itself out and it becomes very composed, very settled, and very pleasant indeed. At the time of filming, this is the sole finished road-going Vantare. But they have sold one more already, and I expect they may shift a few more units, because this is the kind of car for the person that does want to do things rather differently, and there don't seem to be too many compromises. I think if you lined up 1,000 people and gave each of them 300 grand and told them they had to spend it on one car, the vast majority would be far more likely to go and get something like the Ferrari Roma, the new Aston Martin DBS, or something like that. I'd be in that 999. But this is the car built explicitly for that one person in 1,000 who wants to do things deliberately differently and be safe in the knowledge that they are highly unlikely to ever bump into another one of these wherever they go. We live in a rather interesting time for the car. In many ways it can seem all doom and gloom, and I've made a number of videos about just that subject, but in other ways this fear of the future, I think, has spurred a number of projects that otherwise might never have got off the ground. We mocked Jaguar when they came out with the S-Type, but now people are charging millions of pounds for deliberately nostalgic things like the new Aston Martin DB5 continuation. That's a car that's going to set you back the thick end of 3 million quid and isn't even technically road legal. The new Ferrari Daytona SP3, also absolutely gorgeous, also 2 million quid. Today's video isn't really a review, more a kind of look at this, but if you want to know some more factual things, I'll tell you a few of the bits of this car that I'm not so sold on. The front end I actually really quite like, but the rear I'm not so sure on. It just seems a little bit off to my eyes. However, shut lines, quality of paintwork, all that sort of stuff is genuinely very good. And the interior I'm really impressed with, because a lot of the times with a car like this, that's something they just leave alone. Here, they've not. If you didn't know your Aston, you might be forgiven for thinking this is largely unchanged, but in fact, a lot has gone on here. The materials chosen are all very sympathetic to the original car, and that makes it hard to tell what actually happened. The most obvious change is up here, where the old Aston waterfall with its pop-up Volvo nav screen has been replaced by a pair of vents and the starter button. I have to say, this is about the only thing in the car materials-wise I don't like. The next one of these being produced has leather covering the vents, and I think that's a big improvement. The other bit of the car that I really don't like is the steering wheel, partly because it's the thing you have to look at all the time, so you'll notice any imperfections, and there are a few imperfections here in the paintwork, the way that the cruise control has been attached, and I just don't like this. The whole car is actually all put together really fairly nicely with high quality materials. The body is all carbon fibre, but this wheel looks and feels just a little bit too cheap to belong in here. I get what they were trying with this, but I just don't think it worked. I'm also entirely indifferent to the Pioneer screen they've put down here. They've made it fit fairly neatly and it brings with it functionality the original car simply didn't have. But honestly, in a car like this, I'd rather look at an old school, classic kind of navigation system like the one Porsche produce. That, I think, would be a lot more in keeping with the whole image of the car. The star of the show, though, has to be these seats, because they are better than in any other Aston I have ever driven. Not sure what they're sourced from. They have been completely retrimmed, as has most of the interior. They look brilliant, and they support and hug you in a way that the regular DB9 items, even the later ones off the GT, just don't. See, the Aston ones look the part, but they feel tragic, and to be honest, when it comes to seats, I'd rather have them do their job than look like they do their job. As it happens, I'm now driving back to Mark to return the car, and when I do, I'm going to inquire as to who's made these seats, because I want a pair of them for the Maserati. There are also some minor issues in here, chiefly regarding the seals on the window, but I was forewarned about that. Because this car is also something of a pre-production prototype, it's been apart and back together many times, and so the seals are not as good as they should be. This is something they're aware of and will be fixed for any customer cars. Beyond that, though, any criticisms I have of this car really are only criticisms I have of the DB9, like the fairly poor rear seat space or the tiny boot. If you could live with one of those, you could definitely live with one of these. Whether it's worth the money that they're asking, well, only you can really decide. I expect for the majority of people, the answer is going to be no. But that's always the case for these cars. If it were anything different, they simply wouldn't be as special as they are. And this, genuinely, is special. It really is. May not be to all tastes, but I've never been interested in cars that please the masses, because I don't think Mr. Walsh set out to create a Golf. He set out to create his dream car, and if he's happy with it, that's all that really matters. One thing's for certain, he and the team should really be very proud of this. I know there's a lot of people out there who think that to make a car is actually relatively easy, even when all you've got to do is rebody an existing one. But nothing could be further from the truth. To get it feeling as close to a manufactured product as these guys have takes a lot of time, effort, and skill. My hat's off to them. I think they've done good. Anyway, that's enough from me. Please hit the like button. Certainly comment down below, tell me what you think, and we shall see you for the next one. Bye bye.